Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Pulp Crazy. I'm your host, Jason Aiken. In this week's episode, I'm going to be discussing The Peeper by Frank Belknap Long. This short story first appeared in the March 1944 issue of Weird Tales. I read it in an anthology titled Weird Tales, 32 Unearthed Terrors, a story from each year the classic horror and fantasy magazine was published. This anthology includes an introduction by Robert Bloch, and it's edited by Stefan R, Dziemiancowicz, Robert Weinberg, and Martin H. Greenberg. The Peeper is a fantasy horror short story that's a little over 8 pages long in the anthology. It appears to be set around the same time it was published, in 1944. I call it a fantasy horror story because there are elements of both genres within The Peeper. Here's what the introduction from the collection states about it. Frank Belknap Long is one of those rare fantasy writers who can find both the frightening and the poignant in the fantastic. The Peeper is interesting for its implicit criticism of writers who compromise their talent to write for better pay. It leaves one wondering whether Long wasn't commenting on the rampant problem that was beginning to hurt all the pulps by the time the story appeared in 1944. Long began writing for Weird Tales in the 1920s, and his more horrifying stories are usually reprinted. Though a personal friend of Lovecraft's, Long was one of the few people who didn't fall so entirely under Lovecraft's spell that everything he wrote sounded like an imitation. This was the first complete story I've read by Frank Belknap Long, having only experienced a taste of his writing during his portion of The Challenge from Beyond, Round Robin. I found it to be a neat little short story, and as the introduction mentioned, perhaps a bit of a commentary on Long's part. Here are the basics. A column writer named Mike O'Hara seems to have a problem with the booze. One night he comes home and sees his younger self lying in his bed. This younger self is referred to as Michael O'Hara. Evidently his younger self was a fantastic writer and penned wonderful imaginary tales. The current Mike O'Hara is a keynote columnist. I had to look that term up. Keynote columnist. Today, we would basically call him a gossip columnist. Mike seems to be quite successful at it too, as he's paid $44,000 a year for a 12-inch column in 1944. I did a quick online conversion of what that would be in today's dollars in 2015, and it came out to $593,777.47 a year. Not too shabby at all. Money clearly isn't Mike's problem, though. His problem reveals itself in the form of a creature called the Peeper. The Peeper is the best keynote columnist on the other side. He pays Mike a visit and helps himself to using Mike's typewriter. I won't go into any more detail, as I don't want to spoil the story. Overall, I think this is a great little piece of weird fiction, and I'm definitely going to keep my eye out for more stories by Frank Belknap Long, as his writing impressed me here. Well, that's it for this week's episode. Pulp Crazy is located at pulpcrazy.com. I'm at Pulp Crazy on Twitter and facebook.com/pulpcrazy. You can also find me on Facebook at You can also find me on Twitter at @PulpCrazy. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/pulpcast. You can also email me at pulpcrazy@gmail.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see everyone next time.